I sat in the cab of my Ford F-150, parked 3 streets away from the driveway where I had parked every single night for the last 30 years. My eyes were burning, feeling like someone had thrown a handful of hot sand into them, glued to the small, glowing screen of my phone. When I saw that strange silver car pull up to the curb of my house just 15 minutes after I had supposedly left for the airport, I didn't feel that surge of hot, righteous anger you always see in the movies. It wasn't like that at all. Instead, I felt my stomach drop all the way down to the worn heels of my work boots, a cold, heavy stone settling in my gut. It is a terrible, deeply shameful thing for a man to have to spy on a woman he has shared a bed, a life, and a history with for 3 decades. It makes you feel small. It makes you feel dirty. But I knew in my gut, with a certainty that made my hand shake, that if I had actually boarded that plane to London, I might not have had a home to come back to. My name is Joseph Moore. I'm 67 years old, born and raised right here in this city. I spent 40 long, hard years working as a building inspector for the city. My job was simple, but critical. I checked foundations, I looked for stress fractures in the concrete, and I made sure folks were safe in their own homes before they moved their families in. But the bitter irony isn't lost on me today as I sit here telling you this story. I spent 4 decades inspecting concrete, rebar, and timber, but I never once thought to check the deep structural cracks of my own marriage until the roof was already caving in on top of me. I'm sitting here telling you this because the silence in this big empty house is too loud for me to handle alone tonight. It echoes off the walls. If you have a heart and you're listening to this old man, please hit that subscribe button. It tells me I'm not just talking to the drywall. And please, do me a favor and tell me what time it is where you are in the comments down below. It keeps me company to know the world is still turning and people are still living their lives outside this dark room. My wife, Marcia, and I have lived in this sturdy brick bungalow since 1995. We bought it back when I was still climbing ladders every day without my knees popping like rusty hinges. It's a good house, the kind you buy to raise a family in, with a wide front porch where we used to drink sweet iced tea in the summers and watch the neighborhood kids race their bicycles. We raised our 2 beautiful daughters, Vanessa and Jasmine, right here in these rooms. They're grown and gone now, living their own lives with families of their own. For a long time, this house was full of noise, music, laughter, the sound of cooking. But lately, the silence had been heavy, almost suffocating. It wasn't just the empty nest syndrome. It was Marcia. Over the last 6 months, Marcia had been acting different. It started slow, like a leak you don't notice until the floorboards are rot. She started hiding her phone screen against her chest whenever I walked into the room, like she was guarding state secrets. Before, she used to leave that phone anywhere, on the kitchen counter, on the arm of the sofa, but now it was glued to her hand. If I asked her who was texting so late at night, she'd jump like a startled cat and tell me it was just spam or her sister complaining about her husband. Then the packages started arriving. Expensive clothes, dresses with fancy labels I couldn't pronounce, and shoes that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. We couldn't afford things like that on my city pension, and she knew it. When I asked about them, she would wave a hand dismissively, not even looking me in the eye, and tell me they were gifts from her sister or that she found them on a clearance rack at the thrift store. I wanted to believe her. Lord knows I did. When you love someone for 30 years, trust is a habit you don't break easily. You don't want to look too closely at the lies because you're terrified of the truth underneath. But the air in the house had changed. It felt thin and tense, like the pressure drop before a tornado touches down.
The idea for this trip to London wasn't even mine to begin with. I'm a simple man. I like my routine. I like my garden in the back, my morning coffee at the diner, and my evening news in my recliner. I've never had the itch to travel across the ocean. It was Marcia who suggested it, and then she insisted on it. My brother, who moved over to the UK 20 years ago, had undergone hip surgery, and Marcia latched onto that news like a lifeline. She started telling me, "Joseph, you need to go see him. Family is important. He needs you." At first, I thought she was being sweet, looking out for my kin. I thought maybe she was trying to be thoughtful. But then the pressure started. She was pushing me to book that ticket so hard it felt like she was trying to sweep me out the front door with a broom. Every morning, over breakfast, while I was trying to eat my eggs, she'd ask, "Did you buy the ticket yet, Joseph? The prices are going up." She would say, "Joseph, you deserve a break. You worked hard all your life. Go enjoy London." But when I looked across the table at her, her eyes didn't look like she cared about my rest on my brother's hip. They looked impatient. They looked shifting and restless, like she was counting the seconds until I was gone. It hurt my feelings, to be honest with you. I wondered if I was just a nuisance to her now that I was retired and home all day. A man likes to feel wanted in his own castle, not like a guest who has overstayed his welcome. But I didn't want to start a fight. I figured maybe she just needed some space. We had been under each other's feet a lot. So, against a knot in my stomach that told me something wasn't right, I agreed to go. I booked a flight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap she had set for me. In the weeks leading up to the trip, while Marcia was busy acting helpful and packing my bags with an energy I hadn't seen in years, I started noticing other little things, disturbing things. It wasn't just the phone or the clothes anymore.
I noticed items missing from the house. Small things at first, the kind of things you might not miss right away if you weren't paying attention. My coin collection from the study, specifically the silver dollars my father gave me before he passed, was gone from the velvet box. When I went to look for the spare key to the wall safe I kept in the garage, a safe that held our important papers, it wasn't on the hook behind the workbench where it had hung for 15 years. I asked Marcia about them, trying to keep my voice casual, trying not to sound accusatory. "Marsh, have you seen those silver dollars?" She didn't even look up from her magazine. She just sighed, a long, tired sound that made me feel like a child. "Joseph, you probably moved them and forgot," she said. "You're getting so forgetful in your old age." She said it with a pitying smile, shaking her head like I was already half gone. That stung worse than a slap. It made me feel small. It made me feel like maybe I was losing my mind, like my grip on reality was slipping. She did that a lot lately, making me doubt my own memory. "I told you that yesterday, don't you remember?" Or, "You never put that there, you left it in the bedroom." It was subtle, but it was constant, like water dripping on a stone. It was like she was slowly chipping away at my confidence, making me feel like an invalid who couldn't be trusted with his own belongings. That's when the suspicion really took root in my heart. I knew my mind was sharp. I knew I hadn't moved those coins. And deeper down, I knew that the woman telling me I was crazy was the one hiding something terrible. That was the moment I knew I had to test her. I knew I needed eyes inside the house, but I'm not a tech wizard. I don't know about all these fancy spy gadgets or hidden microphones you see in the movies, so I did what any practical man would do. I went to Walmart and bought a regular home security camera, the simple kind people use to watch their dogs or check on their babies while they're at work.
I paid cash for it, $40 and some change, so it wouldn't show up on the bank statement Marcia monitored like a hawk. I felt ridiculous standing in that checkout line, a 67-year-old man buying a pet monitor when I didn't even own a dog anymore. I felt like everyone in the store could see the shame written in neon letters on my forehead. I waited until Marcia went to her hair appointment on Thursday to set it up. My hands were sweating as I climbed onto the step stool. I hid the camera up high on the bookshelf in the living room, shoving it behind some old encyclopedias we hadn't opened in 20 years. I angled it carefully so it caught the front hallway and the main seating area, the heart of the house. I connected it to the app on my phone, tested it 3 times to make sure the audio was clear, and then put the dusty books back in place. My heart was hammering against my ribs the whole time, thumping so loud I thought the neighbors could hear it. I felt like a criminal in my own home. Later that evening, I told her I was all set. I told her I had booked a flight to London for Tuesday morning. For the first time in months, her face lit up. She cooked me a nice dinner, pot roast with the carrots glazed just how I like 'em, and she smiled at me, a real smile. But sitting there eating that roast, looking at her across the candles, I couldn't help but wonder if that smile was for me or for the empty chair I was about to leave behind. The meat tasted like ash in my mouth. I called a local taxi company because I told her I didn't want to leave my truck at the airport with the parking rates being so high these days. It was a lie, but she bought it instantly. I loaded my heavy suitcases into the taxi trunk. The thud sounded final, like a gavel coming down.
Marcia stood on the porch in her robe, waving. She looked relieved. There was no sadness in her eyes, no "I'll miss you," no "hurry back," just a brightness that screamed, "Finally." As the taxi pulled away, I watched her in the rearview mirror until she turned and went back inside, closing the door firmly without looking back. I didn't go to the airport, of course. I had instructed the taxi driver to drop me off at a diner a few miles away, a place called Betty's, where the truckers stopped for breakfast. I dragged my suitcases inside and sat in a corner booth for an hour, nursing a cup of black coffee that tasted like mud, staring at the clock on the wall. The waitress, a kind lady named Doris, asked me if I was waiting for someone. "No, ma'am," I said, my voice raspy and dry. "Just killing time." I felt like a ghost in my own life, suspended between the lie I had told and the truth I was terrified to discover. After an hour had passed, enough time for me to be at the airport and through security in Marcia's mind, I used an app on my phone to call an Uber. I didn't want to use a local taxi service again. Small towns talk, and I didn't want anyone mentioning they saw Joseph Moore back in town with his luggage. I had the driver drop me off a few blocks down from my own neighborhood, in front of a community park where a few kids were swinging on the rusty set. It felt surreal to be walking through my own community like an intruder, keeping my head down, pulling my cap lower over my eyes to hide my face. I walked the rest of the way to the side street where I had parked my truck the night before. I had told Marcia I had parked it at the mechanic for a tune-up while I was gone. Another lie in a web that was getting too thick for me to manage comfortably. I slipped into the driver's seat of my Ford, the familiar smell of grease, old upholstery, and peppermint offering a tiny bit of comfort in the chaos. I reclined the seat back all the way so that if anyone walked by walking their dog, they wouldn't see me sitting there. I looked like someone taking a nap, or maybe just abandoned. My hands were trembling, shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. I took a deep breath, the kind that rattles in your chest when you're old and tired, and opened the camera app. The little wheel spun for a second, loading, buffering my future. Then the image popped up. My living room, quiet, still, just the way I left it. Sunlight was streaming through the shears, but I knew with a sinking, sick certainty that it wouldn't stay that way for long. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. The house was dead quiet on the screen. I could see dust motes dancing in the sunlight coming through the sheared curtains. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator that the camera picked up from the other room. I started feeling foolish. I started feeling a deep, hot wave of guilt washing over me. I thought, Joseph, look at you. You're a jealous, paranoid old fool. Your wife is probably just cleaning the house or watching her soap operas in peace. I thought about all the years we spent together, the struggles, the bills we paid, the daughters we raised. I thought about how I was violating her privacy, spying on her like a creeper in the night. I was just about to sit up, start the truck, and drive home. I was already planning the apology in my head. I'd tell her I missed my flight, that I got scared of flying, that I just wanted to be home with her. I was ready to beg for forgiveness for my suspicion. I was ready to be the fool if it meant my marriage was safe. But just as my hand reached for the ignition key, I saw movement on the screen. Through the front window, which faces the driveway, I could see a car pulling in. It wasn't Marcia's car. It wasn't the mailman. It was a silver sedan, late model, looking a bit beat up on the bumper. My heart stopped beating. I froze, my hand hovering over the key. I watched as the car engine turned off. The silence in my truck was so heavy I could hear the blood rushing in my ears like a river. It wasn't a delivery driver. It wasn't a neighbor coming to borrow sugar. Someone was parking in my spot, the spot I had just vacated like they belonged there. I stared at the small screen, squinting my eyes to see the details, wishing I had bought a camera with better resolution. The driver's door opened and a man got out. He wasn't anyone I knew. He wasn't a cousin, a handyman, or a friend from church. He looked young, maybe in his late 30s or early 40s. He was wearing a suit that looked too shiny, the kind of cheap polyester suit a man wears when he wants to look important but doesn't have the money or the class to back it up. He smoothed back his slick hair and looked around the neighborhood, checking left and right to see if anyone was watching. He didn't look like a friend dropping by for coffee. He looked like a man checking the perimeter. He walked up the front path with a confident, arrogant stride that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I waited for him to ring the doorbell. I waited for him to knock, but he didn't do either of those things. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key, a silver key that glinted in the morning sun. My stomach lurched into my throat. I have never given a key to my house to anyone except my daughters. I watched him slide the key into the lock of my front door, the door I painted red 3 years ago because Marcia said it brought good luck. He turned it smoothly, pushed the door open, and stepped inside my house like he paid the mortgage. The violation of it hit me harder than a physical blow. A stranger had a key to my sanctuary, and there was only one person in this world who could have given it to him. The camera angle on my phone shifted slightly as the front door opened, and I saw Marcia come running from the kitchen. She wasn't wearing the faded house coat she had on when I left an hour ago. She was dressed up, wearing one of those new, expensive floral dresses I'd asked about, and her hair was fixed and sprayed. But it was her reaction that tore me apart, piece by piece. I saw Marcia run to him in the hallway, and the way she hugged him wasn't how you hug a nephew or a distant relative. She threw her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder, melting into him. She held on to him like he was a lifeline, like he was the only thing keeping her from drowning in the ocean.
I sat there in my truck, a grown man of 67 years, feeling hot tears prick my eyes. It wasn't even the romance of it that hurt me the most in that second. It wasn't the jealousy of another man touching what was mine. It was the look on her face when she pulled back. She was beaming. She looked radiant, glowing with a light I hadn't seen in decades. She looked happier in that moment, greeting this stranger in the cheap suit, than she had looked with me in 10 years. That realized silence between us, the cold dinners, the separate lives, it all made sense in a terrible, clarifying flash. She had been saving all her joy for him. I realized then that I wasn't just losing my wife. I'd already lost her a long time ago. I was just the caretaker of her house, the payer of her bills, while her heart lived somewhere else entirely. They walked into the living room, their arms linked together. They looked comfortable, domestic, like a couple that had done this 100 times before. The man walked right over to my leather recliner, the big brown one I've sat in every night for 15 years to watch the 6 o'clock news. It's my chair. Everyone knows it's Joseph's chair. Even the grandkids know not to jump on Pop-Pop's chair. But this man, this shiny suited stranger, flopped down into it like it was his throne. He kicked his feet up onto my coffee table, leaving his dirty shoes on. Marcia didn't scold him. Marcia, who used to yell at me if I even looked at the coffee table with shoes on, just smiled at him like he was a king. I turned up the volume on my phone all the way, pressing the speaker against my ear, praying my battery wouldn't die on me now. I needed to hear them. I needed to know what this was. Was it a fling? Was she in love? The visual was painful enough, tearing at my pride, but I knew the words were going to be the nails in the coffin of my marriage. The audio crackled a bit, static from the internet connection, but then their voices came through clear and sharp. They weren't whispering. They thought they were alone. They thought the old fool was halfway over the Atlantic Ocean by now, sipping ginger ale at 30,000 feet.
"Did he leave?" the man asked, his voice grating and arrogant. He sounded like a man who was used to getting what he wanted without working for it, the kind of voice that tries too hard to sound tough. He stretched his arms out, taking up all the space in my chair, rubbing the leather like he was testing the quality. "He's gone," Marcia said, laughing a light, airy laugh I hadn't heard in ages. It was a girlish sound, completely at odds with the tired woman I knew. She walked over and sat on the arm of the chair, running her hand through his slick back hair. I saw the taxi take him away. "We're safe." "Finally," the man groaned, closing his eyes. "I thought he'd never leave. The old guy is stubborn as a mule." "Don't worry about him," Marcia said, and her voice turned hard, cold as ice. "We have a whole week. That's plenty of time to clear everything out before he gets back." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water poured down my spine. Clear everything out?
I frowned at the phone, my brow furrowing. I didn't understand. I thought they were talking about clearing out of the house to go on a date, or maybe spending the week together in my bed. But the way she said it, it sounded calculated. It sounded like a job. The man smirked, opening his eyes. You sure he won't come back early? Panic at the airport or something? She's going to London, baby. He's not swimming back. We have the run of the place. My heart stopped beating for a second because the realization crashed into me like a freight train. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a lonely wife seeking comfort in another man's arms because her husband was old and boring. This was a robbery. I got the truck coming tomorrow morning, the man said, looking around the room, evaluating my possessions with greedy eyes. His gaze lingered on the flat-screen TV, the antique clock on the mantel that belonged to my grandfather, the expensive sound system I had bought last Christmas. My boys will be here at 8 a.m. We can get the furniture and electronics out by noon. Good, Marcia said, nodding. I've already tagged the things we're taking with blue sticky notes.
The rest we can leave for the junk haulers, or just leave it for him to deal with when he gets back to an empty house. I felt sick. I physically gagged in the cab of my truck, the taste of bile rising in my throat. They were planning to strip the house. They were planning to take everything of value and leave me with the shell. This man wasn't just a lover, he was a predator, a vulture, and my wife had opened the gate to let him in to feast on my bones. I thought about the gifts from her sister, the expensive clothes. They were probably bought with money she was siphoning off, or maybe he bought them for her as a down payment on his heist. They were going to wipe me out. Marcia stood up and walked to the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator door open. She came back a moment later holding a beer, my beer. It was a bottle of the craft stout I saved for special occasions, the expensive stuff my daughter Jasmine buys me for my birthday. She handed it to the man like she was a waitress at a bar, eager to please. He took a long swig, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and looked at her. What about the deed and the bonds? You said he keeps them here, not at the bank. Marcia nodded. He keeps it in the wall safe in the garage, but he's so senile he probably forgot the combination. Senile? I whispered in the truck, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Is that what she told him? That I was losing my wits? It explained why she had been gaslighting me for months, telling me I was forgetful. She was setting the stage. She was building the narrative that Joseph was old and confused, so when things went missing, nobody would believe me. Don't worry, Marcia continued, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. I know exactly how to get in. He thinks he's so smart with his little secrets, but he's predictable. I watched my wife of 38 years stand up and walk toward the hallway that led to the garage, motioning for him to follow.
She walked with a purpose I had never seen before. She wasn't just stealing my things, she was stealing my legacy. That safe held the deed to the house, fully paid off after 30 years of mortgage payments. It held the savings bonds I had bought for the grandkids' college funds. It held my mother's jewelry that was supposed to go to Vanessa and Jasmine. It held everything I had worked for as a city inspector, crawling under houses, dealing with spiders and mold, climbing attics in the summer heat for 40 years, just so I could leave something behind for my family. And she was going to hand it all over to this shiny-suited grifter without a second thought. I realized then that she must have been planning this for a long time. You don't just wake up one morning and decide to liquidate your husband's life. This was cold. This was calculated malice. The Marcia I loved, the woman who nursed me when I had pneumonia, the woman who cried at our daughter's weddings, she was gone. Maybe she never existed. Or maybe she did, and this greed just ate her alive. Either way, the woman on that screen was a thief, and I was her mark. I wanted to drive my truck right through the front door. I wanted to storm in there screaming, tearing him out of my chair, shaking her until she explained why she hated me this much. The rage was boiling in my blood, hot and blinding, making my vision blur. But I stopped myself. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm a building inspector, and I know that if you rush into a collapsing building without a plan, you get crushed by the debris.
You have to assess the structure. You have to be calm. I knew I needed more than just anger. I needed the law. If I went in there swinging, I'd be the one in handcuffs. I'd be the abusive, senile husband she probably painted me as to her friends. I needed them caught in the act. I dialed the police 9 emergency line, my thick fingers fumbling over the keypad. When the dispatcher answered, I forced my voice to be steady, though it sounded dead and hollow to my own ears.
Yes, ma'am, I said. I need to report a burglary in progress at 452 Maple Street. I am the homeowner. I am watching via security camera, and there are intruders in my home stealing my property. I didn't tell them it was my wife. I let them think it was strangers. Let the police sort it out when they got there. I wanted it on record as a crime, not a domestic dispute. I needed the police to see the thief before they saw the wife. After I hung up with the police, I made the hardest call of my life. I called my daughter, Vanessa. She lives just 2 towns over, about 20 minutes away. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and bright. "Hey, Daddy, are you at the airport? Did you board yet?" Hearing her voice broke me. The dam burst, and I started crying, silent, heavy tears running down my face into my gray beard. I felt so ashamed. "Nessa," I choked out, my voice cracking, "I need you to come to the house, right now." "Dad, what's wrong? Did you crash? Are you okay?" Panic rose in her voice instantly. She thought I was hurt. "I'm not at the airport," I said, my voice shaking so bad she barely understood me. "I'm down the street. Your mother, there's a man. They're robbing the house, Nessa. Please, I need a witness. I need family. I can't do this alone." There was a silence on the line, heavy and shocked. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, "I'm coming, Dad. I'm leaving right now. Lock your doors. Stay safe. Don't go in there alone." I sat in the truck and watched them on the screen. Marcia was back in the living room now, holding a stack of papers, my bonds. She was showing them to the man, and he was grinning like a shark that just found blood in the water. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I was done crying. Now, I was just ready to end it. I gave it 5 minutes. I wanted to time it so the police would be close, but I couldn't wait forever. I started the truck engine. The rumble of the old Ford felt like a battle cry, a familiar vibration that steadied my nerves. I put it in drive and crept down the street. I didn't speed. I didn't peel out. I drove slowly, deliberately, like a funeral procession. I pulled into my own driveway, pulling right up behind the silver sedan, blocking it completely. The nose of my truck was inches from his bumper. There was no escape for that car now. I looked at the phone screen one last time. I saw the moment they heard the engine. The sound of my truck is distinctive. It has a rattle in the muffler Marcia always complained about. They both froze. The man looked at the window, confused. Marcia looked terrified. She knew that sound. She had heard it pulling into that driveway every evening for 30 years to signal that I was home from work. She dropped the papers on the table. Her mouth formed a perfect O of panic. The man jumped up from the recliner, looking for a back exit, his arrogance vanishing instantly. I turned off the engine, stepped out into the cool morning air, and walked toward my front door. My legs felt heavy, like lead, but I kept moving, one foot in front of the other. I didn't knock. It's my house. I paid for every brick, every shingle. I took my keys out of my pocket, the real keys, not to spare, and unlocked the door. I turned the knob, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The air in the house felt charged, electric with guilt and fear. It smelled of her perfume and his cheap cologne. I walked straight into the living room. Marcia was standing by the coffee table, her hands hovering over the paper she had dropped. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost rising from the grave. Her face lost all its color, turning a sickly shade of gray, the makeup standing out starkly against her pale skin. She was trembling, her hands shaking violently. "Joseph?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, a squeak of terror. "Joseph, you missed your flight.
She tried to step in front of the table, trying to hide the papers with her body, trying to block my view of the safe key in her hand. It was pathetic. It was tragic. The man was standing by the window, looking nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He tried to puff his chest out, tried to look official, but his eyes were dotting around the room, looking for a way out. "I'm just the appraiser, sir," he stammered, lying through his teeth, his voice cracking. "She called me for an estimate on the furniture." I looked at him. Up close, his suit looked even cheaper, the fabric shiny and worn at the elbows. He smelled the sweat and my beer. I looked at Marcia.
She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was staring at my boots, unable to look at the husband she had just betrayed. "An appraiser?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Is that why you have my beer in your hand? Is that why you have your feet on my table?" "Joseph, please," Marcia started, her voice rising in pitch, bordering on hysteria. "It's a misunderstanding. I wanted to see what things were worth, for insurance, in case anything happened while you were gone. I was doing it for us." She was spinning lies faster than a spider spins silk. She thought I was stupid. She still thought she could talk her way out of it, because she thought I was the same old Joseph who believed everything she said, the Joseph who just wanted peace. "And the truck coming tomorrow?" I asked, cutting her off. "To clear everything out by noon? Was that for insurance too?" Her mouth snapped shut. Her eyes went wide. She realized then that I knew. She realized the game was over. "I know who you are," I said to the man, my voice quiet and tired. I didn't shout. I didn't have the energy to shout. The anger had burned down to a cold, hard ash. "And I know what you're doing." I held up my phone, turning the screen so they could see. It showed the live feed of them standing there, looking like deer in headlights. The delay on the video made it look like a ghostly echo of their guilt. "I've been watching you since I left. I heard every word. I heard about the truck. I heard about the safe. I heard you call me a senile old man." Marcia let out a sob, a strangled sound of despair. She reached out for me, her hand trembling. "Joseph, no. It was just talk. We were just joking. Please." "Don't touch me," I said. It wasn't angry. It was just a statement of fact. I stepped back, out of her reach. "You called me senile, Marcia. You mocked me in my own house while you planned to rob me blind. You were going to leave me with nothing." Before she could answer, the room was bathed in flashing blue light. It swept across the walls, illuminating the family photos we hadn't taken down yet. The police cruiser pulled up onto the lawn, bypassing the block driveway. I saw the relief on the man's face for a split second. He probably thought he could talk to the cops, charm them, maybe spin a story about a crazy husband. But then a second cruiser pulled up, and a third. Officers came to the door, hands on their belts, faces serious. "We got a call about a burglary," the lead officer said, stepping inside, scanning the room. "It's a mistake," Marcia screamed, finally losing her composure completely. She was crying now, ugly, hysterical tears that ran her mascara down her face. "This is my husband. I live here. It's all a misunderstanding. Tell them, Joseph." These two were planning to empty the house, I told the officer calmly. "I have it recorded on my phone. This man has no legal right to be here. He entered with a stolen key." The officer looked at the man. "Sir, step outside. We need to check your ID and pat you down." The betrayal was illuminated by those strobe lights. Marcia's face twisted in fear, not sorry for what she did, but terrified that she got caught. The next hour was a blur of questions, radios crackling, and paperwork. I showed the officers the video on my phone. They saw the man using the key. They heard the audio about the truck and the plan to rob the place. They arrested the man for trespassing and attempted theft, since he had already stacked the valuables and was in possession of stolen property, the key. They put him in handcuffs. He cursed at Marcia as they dragged him out the front door. "You said he was gone. You said he was stupid. You set me up." I looked at Marcia. She was sitting on the sofa, shivering, hugging herself. The officers told me that since she was my wife and her name was on the deed, they couldn't arrest her for being in her own house. But the conspiracy to steal was a civil matter I'd have to take up in court. "I want her out," I said to the officer. "Joseph, you can't kick me out," she wailed, looking up at me with red eyes.
I'm filing for an emergency protective order, I said, looking her dead in the eye. And I'm changing the locks.
You can leave now, or you can wait until Vanessa gets here and explains to our daughter why you were robbing her inheritance. She tried to grab my arm, begging, "We can work it out, Joe. I was confused. I was lonely. It didn't mean anything." I looked at her, and I saw a stranger. "The Marsha I married wouldn't do this," I said. "I don't know who you are, but you need to go." Vanessa arrived just as the police were finishing up. She ran to me, hugging me so hard I almost fell over. She was crying, shaking. When she saw her mother sitting on the porch crying in the police cars, she understood everything without me saying a word. She didn't scream at her mother. She just looked at her with a disappointment that was worse than anger. It was a look of pure heartbreak. "How could you, Mom?" Vanessa asked quietly. "To Dad? After everything?" Marsha didn't have an answer. She just looked down at her hands. Vanessa helped me pack a bag for Marsha. We went into the bedroom I hadn't slept in properly for months, and put some clothes and toiletries in a suitcase. Neither of us said a word. The silence was heavy. We handed the bag to Marsha on the porch. She called a taxi, probably to go to her sister's, or maybe to bail out her boyfriend. I didn't care where she went, as long as it wasn't here. The locksmith arrived the next morning. I paid him to change every lock in the house, front door, back door, garage. I paid him with the cash I had in my wallet, the money I was supposed to spend on fish and chips in London. It felt like a fair trade. I bought my safety back. I'm still in the house. It's been 3 months now since that day. The divorce papers are filed, and the lawyers are fighting over the assets, but I have the video, so I'm not worried. Vanessa comes over a lot to check on me, and Jasmine calls every day from California. But at night, the house feels big and empty. The silence isn't peaceful yet. It's hollow. It echoes. I sleep with the bedroom door locked, a habit I can't seem to break, listening to the house settle.
I spend my days in the garden or fixing little things around the place, checking the foundation, sealing the cracks I ignored for so long. I learned a hard lesson at 67. You can build a foundation that passes every inspection. You can use the best materials. You can paint the door red for luck. But you can never really know the heart of the person living inside the walls. You can never inspect the soul for stress fractures. I saved my house and I saved my legacy, but I lost the illusion of my life. And sometimes in the quiet of the night, I wonder which loss is heavier. If you've ever been through something like this yourself, or if you've ever had to start over when you thought you were done building, feel free to share it in the comments. Hearing your stories reminds this old man that he's not walking through this world alone. Take care of yourselves, check your foundations, and never ignore the cracks.